Emancipation is long overdue, so it becomes procrastination, cause freedom is within you. For some reason we think we're free, so we'll never be, because we haven't recognized slavery. You still a slave, look at how you behave, debating on where and when and how and what master gave.
Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, a weekly show about authoritarianism, government overreach, and global injustice. I am your host, Conrad Rogas. My website is truthandlaw.com, and I'll remind you that if tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there's someone in the street keeping it at bay. And this will be episode 20, the 20th episode of This Week in Tyranny. Today is Sunday, April 23rd, 2023. Two stories today that I'll be discussing. The first one has to do with Fox. So Fox News, the media giant corporation, has paid Dominion Voting Systems $787 million to settle a case because they were being sued for defamation having to do with their claims about the 2020 election and that election being rigged. So just to take a step back and give you the synopsis of what happened, Fox News, they actually didn't touch this deeply, but they made some comments. There has been the conservative narrative about that election being rigged. Okay, so some of their anchors, some of the people on their show were saying that there was election fraud happening, and that specifically this happened because Dominion Voting Systems was one of the corporations that was making the actual voting machines for the casting the ballots, right? So then they sued Fox for defamation, right? For defamation of character, basically that they accused them of helping to rig an election. So before it went to trial, they actually settled, and Fox News basically had to pay them almost $1 billion, right? And now Fox Corporation made a statement on Tuesday, April 18th. They said, "We are pleased to have reached a settlement of our dispute with Dominion Voting Systems. We acknowledge the court's rulings finding certain claims about Dominion to be false. This settlement reflects Fox's continued commitment to the highest journalistic standards. We are hopeful that our decision to resolve this dispute with Dominion amicably, instead of the acrimony of a divisive trial, allows the country to move forward from these issues." So this is a clear defeat, right? A clear admission of defeat from Fox. Now, to the people who know a little more about this, about the whole voting thing and whether it was election fraud, whether it was not, I personally have not even watched 2000 Mules. I'm not somebody that's that familiar with really what the specifics of this election. So I won't go too much into it because I'm not actually that well researched in the details of that election and what was going on. But I will say that some of these views now that Fox is washing their hands of and saying that they were false and that they want to move forward from, I will say that there is some evidence there, and I think some of those claims are compelling, right? But I won't go any further than that. I will just remind people that the first episode of This Week in Tyranny is to this day not on YouTube because of something I said about the elections, actually, to that extent, in that slant of some of those claims having weight. So it has been censored, and there's censorship there. And whenever there's censorship somewhere, that basically all but tells you, maybe not 100%, but it makes it very, very highly likely that there is truth to that, because lies aren't censored, truth is censored. So I'll say that about this, but really the main story here, the main takeaway from this story is that that's the problem with arguing details with something like elections. Because if you now made some claims about the voting machines being rigged, well, say they test now and they figure out that the machine was not rigged, then your whole claim falls apart. I don't argue against elections from the standpoint of the vote being rigged, or from the standpoint of the vote being stolen, or the absentee ballots. I've heard all these claims, and I don't argue elections on that level because I believe it's a waste of time. I know it's a waste of time. The argument about elections, and I agree that there's that there's a problem with elections, right? So these people that were on Fox, the anchors, some of them, I will say that they were probably trying to get the truth out there, and they were trying to do a good thing. But we should argue elections on a higher level, because the real problem with elections is putting your faith in somebody you don't know and you can't trust, and that's how politics is, right? Representative government is a fantasy, because representative governments will look at the word. It's representative. They represent your claims, your interest to the ruling classes. But that is, of course, twisted, because they do that for money, for lobbying. And really, these people who go to be politicians, a lot like lawyers, they do word magic. They twist language around, and really, they're not trying to get any real change accomplished. They don't talk like me. They don't talk like somebody who's really telling you the truth and who can really discuss what needs to be done on a administrative scale, on a grand decision-making scale. They don't do that. The politicians just really represent their own interests. They don't represent us. And both political parties, they get a piece of the pie. They get a piece of the pie as far as the truth goes. So that both political parties have a piece of the truth at hand, but they do not have the whole thing. It's split. Conceptually, it's split down the middle. It's just that usually, whichever party is in power, the other one will have more truth. And so what I'm saying is, right now, the Democrat Party holds the White House, right? And the general narrative where the world is going, it's more liberal, it's more towards the Democratic Party, right? So that's why 80% or 90% of the truth is not with the conservatives. But here's what will happen if and when the conservatives take over the White House again, and the world goes that way. Say that the macroeconomic, the macro social dynamics are going towards that side, the right side, the conservative side. What's going to happen is now more corruption is going to be evident when they're in control on their side, and now the liberals will have a higher percentage of the truth, which is how things were 15, 20 years ago. If you remember, this same Fox News that we're now trying to bring light to some problems with the election, right? They were trying to bring attention to some of those things. I won't repeat them because I don't want to get censored. But they're the same people who are saying that Iran and Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, right? That were totally espousing the imperialist narratives, right? To go into the Middle East. The whole thing about going into the Middle East and taking down Al-Qaeda after 9/11. This was the same Fox News that were spreading those lies, and now there's supposed to be some beacon of truth. How? Representative government will always protect the people above it, which is the occult, the historical king, which is now a ruling class, the occult ruling class that stands behind government. And even if you don't believe that exists, even below that, government is a corporation. So you'll never get to hold those people accountable, because in reality, there is no such thing as an office of a senator or a House representative or a president. In reality, there are only people. And you'll never get to hold those people accountable because you believe in government. In reality, there are no governments, there are just people. There are just people making claims, there are people doing immoral things, there are people engaging in fraud and theft of property, right? In the real world, there are no offices, clerks, or registrars, or agents. There are only people making claims, either rightfully or wrongfully, and that's the problem with arguing details like with the election. Because if you're wrong, if you make a claim that specific voting machine was rigged, and it comes out that it is not, and that can be proven in court, you're going to lose not only the battle, you're going to lose the war, because that's going to paint your whole claim as incorrect because you use that detail, right? Whether that's fair or not, that's how it's going to appear to the public, especially if you're fighting against the system that controls the judges. It controls the money, so therefore controls the judges and controls the courts. We got to be sharper than that. So now history will remember this as a defeat of Fox News, right? So people will equate getting a detail wrong with getting the whole claim wrong, the whole argument. That's why we should argue it from a higher standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a grand causal factor standpoint, as I broke down with the real problem of elections. Major corporations and media are not to be trusted, bottom line. So Fox is going to now tuck its tail and run. As they said, they're happy that the country can move forward from these issues. Well, should we move forward from those issues? If they were right to say that, then they should stand on it. This is the time to fight, if anything. But Fox News is not going to do that because they're a corporation, so they're worried about their money. They're not worried about the truth. They were only representing maybe a piece of the truth because it was the most expedient thing. It was the most prudent thing for them at the time because ultimately they want more viewers. So they're not speaking the truth because they want to do something good for the world. They're speaking the truth because the truth is in demand for that particular conservative audience that watches Fox News, right? So they're just trying to keep their company afloat. They'll tuck and run. These are our enemies. Even if they represent something that we agree with, these are our enemies. They are not our friends. They are not our allies in this battle. They are our enemies. They're just portraying themselves as being aligned with our interests. They are not. Just like those politicians, those representatives. As I mentioned, the election should be argued at the level of first principles, and representative government is a fantasy. But to speak more about the whole court thing, the whole defamation trial thing, because it seems like this is the direction that the world is going in. If you say something now that's against the globalist totalitarian narrative, you're not even going to be arrested, not even censored. You're going to get bankrupted by legal fees. And this is a great example of it. Financially is how we're going to get taken down, and the economic and financial tyranny is what is strengthening, as we have seen in the last year and a half, 2 years with inflation. Economically, this is where the main shots are being fired now. And it seems like anybody can get sued for defamation now, you know? Thanks, Johnny Depp. As we've seen with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. Everybody was on Johnny's side then and kind of supporting the side that is trying to get, supporting the plaintiff against the defendant. And say what you want about it, it might be insignificant. I think it's very significant that it is now in the collective consciousness that people subconsciously see that this is something that makes sense. If somebody says something, makes a claim, now you take them to court, you drag them through the courts, and right or wrong, as a defendant, you're basically going to lose because of the legal system, and the court system is parasitic. I won't even go into a personal story. I won't go into that. But we'll just go into the next story. But I wanted to end that one with saying that look out for this. Look out for the whole defamation thing. Because this is the new censorship. And now the courts are going to be used as that weapon, as that censoring tool, as that enforcement agent. And it is economic in nature. And economic is what's big right now. Economic is the new front, the weapon of choice for this tyranny system. But I'll go on to what is called the Teen Takeover in Chicago. What it really is and was is like a seasonal Chicago festival of revelry and foolishness. And basically, for those that don't know, in Chicago last week, what happened was a group of young people are basically running through the downtown area, burning things, setting stuff on fire, right, causing chaos, basically just being loud. There were two shootings that weekend, I believe. So it's not that they were protesting something or anything like that. It's basically just like an outburst, kind of like a purge of energy. And it was on that side it was called the Teen Takeover, what they're doing. But really what it is kind of like a festival of chaos and revelry, right? And just vandalism and things like that. It actually happened 11 months ago as well, so that's why I call it a seasonal Chicago festival, because it happened last year. But why is this tyranny and why is this on this show? Well, this actually gets a lot of the tyranny accomplished, because these are the kinds of things that are coordinated and provocateur. So this actually serves all of the interests, multiple interests, but it serves accelerating tyranny and totalitarianism. The way you do that is because now people are seeing that violence from young people and that vandalism and property damage. And what it creates now is support for the police, support for more control, and it creates fear among the working class, middle class citizenry, right? And that's actually why the police response in these kinds of situations is soft. They're not going to treat them like they treat the people that the cops shoot in those police brutality videos that we sometimes get. They're going to be very soft with them. They're going to stand on the sidelines and watch. So that's going to create, now the public is going to call for harsher treatment, and what the public is going to do is actually be coaxed and goaded into supporting their own enslavement. And that's why these things are coordinated and provocateur, because it's so easy to do. You just need a couple local social media influencers, right? To say there's going to be a gathering. It's called a teen takeover, which isn't it's kind of a neutral term. It's a term that's going to get a lot of people into doing it. It's going to get a lot of numbers to come out. And then you're going to have a couple people throwing a gasoline bottle, some people smashing windows. And with young people who are usually drinking on the weekend, they're smoking, they're taking pills, which is becoming more and more popular here in Chicago. It's going to be very easy to get people to do some foolish and violent acts. Maybe not so much against violence against people, even though there were 2 shootings, but violence as far as property damage, which is violence. You know, you're damaging other people's property for no reason, just as like a purge, just as basically flipping the rules of society upside down, kind of a rebellious outburst, right? The occult ruling class, even the surface level government, that's why I say it serves multiple interests, but both of those, the occult ruling class that stands above government and the surface level government, they actually benefit from this, and they encourage and influence these kinds of outbursts of vandalism and rile up young people in order to inspire fear throughout the public, because, as I said, they will call for the higher police presence, and the police, they actually will want the police to treat them more harshly. They're going to say things like, they should really bring the hammer down on them, and they should beat them up. So that they're calling for that here, but what they're actually calling for is their own enslavement, and they're calling for militarized police. I've made stories about this, about the different police training centers. They're actually building one in Chicago, those Cop City training centers, where the police are going to be trained to be more militarized. And this is now going to be a response to the fact that many violent criminals, gang members, are being let out easily. They're not spending a lot of time in prison. A lot of people are blaming the mayor, former mayor Lori Lightfoot, for this. Just like with the elections, I don't argue the details. I argue from the first principle standpoint, from the higher point of view, which is, well, the reason they're letting out these criminals is because they want you to call for harsher control, more control, but the control is not really to control the criminals, because the criminals are already controlled by their own immoral way of life. So there are always going to be criminals and drug dealers and all of this. And the more there are of those, the more it benefits the system of slavery and the ruling class, because the people are now going to call for their control. The criminals are controlled anyway. They're controlled to their addictions. They're controlled to their lifestyle. And the people who are not controlled, they're scared of the criminals. They're scared of the violence. They're scared of the gangs, the mafia, the mobs. They're going to call for that control so that the real dominator will bring the hammer down on them. But then who they're really bringing down the hammer on are those people, the middle class, the working class people. So that's the big game here. That's This Week in Tyranny. I'll just say this about that story. It appears that there wasn't another big teen takeover. I guess this information will be rolling in, so I might update if there was something, but it's just these things that happen every once in a while. These big events that are supposed to scare the public. I'm not scared of any chaos or violence like that. Well, the only thing I fear, and fear is really not the word to use, is control, and that is the big threat, right? That is the threat outside of our door. That's who we should be standing at the window and looking through the blinds, seeing where that predator is, because that predator is coming. So that was This Week in Tyranny, and I'll be back next week with another This Week in Tyranny. Thank you very much. This is my 20th episode, so thank you for everyone who's been listening. If you're a new listener, I'll definitely have more material coming out on my on my channel, Truth and Law, my website, truthandlaw.com, talking about some other topics. But thank you very much to everybody supporting. This is a bit of a milestone, episode 20, but I'm sure we'll be at episode 100 in no time. With the tyranny that's going on, maybe twice a week will become a standard. But I'll say this, it's not enough to just talk about the tyranny. Talking about it is the first step, but really activism and changing our life and bringing change into the world. We really need to create the change, just as these stories with tyranny, right? I can make five stories about the tyranny of this week. Can we make 3 or 5 stories about people fighting against tyranny? And that is the problem here, is that our level of action is not at the level of action of the criminals. And that is why throughout human history, criminals have control, psychopaths have control. Immoral people are in control because their level of action is much higher than the people who think they are good people, who claim to be good people. So that is my message, and I'll be back next week. Thank you for viewing the video.
You either vote for the mumps or the measles. Whether you vote for the lesser of 2 evils, you vote for evil. Politics and God are not equal, but the education to get on God is really lethal. People have more respect for a holy book